The Struggle of Two Therapists, a relationship between a cousin and a sister, 22 years age difference. I don't know why I kept postponing it, but when I started studying the material, it became clear to me that the story is valuable and instructive. Jacob Nolan was born in 1991 into a wealthy family and lived in Miami, Florida. He was the third and youngest child and received the greatest love from his parents. His mother and father considered Jacob gifted, intelligent, and very resourceful. They saw that he was different and stood out from his peers, yet at the age of 5, the boy was diagnosed with ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. When Jacob turned 15, his parents noticed that the boy was experiencing increasingly frequent severe mood swings. Nevertheless, he was better at school than others. Once, he developed a learning application for smartphones and won a competition in Miami with it. A month later, Jacob could no longer get up. He just lay on the bed and didn't want to do anything, not even get up. His parents pleaded with their son to go to school, but Jacob did not listen to them. Mother and father invited a doctor who diagnosed the boy with depression and an anxiety disorder. At the age of 17, Jacob Nolan said that he no longer wanted to live. The parents were very concerned about their son's behavior and condition and sent him to the hospital, where he was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. Bipolar disorder is a severe, chronic mental illness characterized by dramatic mood swings ranging from deep depression to periods of incredible emotional highs. The patient is a prisoner of their own thoughts. They can achieve nothing in life as their grandiose plans repeatedly end in a depressive episode. After high school, Jacob attended college. Parallel to his studies, he was constantly undergoing treatment. Psychiatrists prescribed him increasingly stronger medications. In total, Jacob Nolan underwent dozens of treatments between the ages of 17 and 20, taking 5 to 6 pills per day and changing about 30 medications. But nothing had a positive effect. The year 2012 arrived. The 21-year-old Jacob Nolan was still going downhill. His parents worried about their son and didn't know what to do next. Then one day they received a call from their relatives in New York, Pamela Buchbinder, who offered her help. "God has finally answered our prayers," exclaimed Jacob Nolan's parents, but if they had known what was coming for their family, they would never have accepted the help. Pamela Buchbinder, 43, worked as a psychotherapist and lived with her 4-year-old son, Calder, in Manhattan's Chelsea neighborhood. Jacob Nolan and Pamela Buchbinder were cousins with an age difference of 22 years. Jacob was her son's godfather. In 2012, Pamela expressed her desire to help her cousin. The woman offered him to move from Florida to her in New York to her apartment in Chelsea. At home, she conducted personal psychotherapy sessions with him and prescribed him the necessary pills. In return, Jacob had to take care of his godson, Calder. The young man admitted that a warm relationship quickly developed between him and Pamela. He had full trust in the adult, experienced woman and regarded her as an authority. In this photo, Jacob is lying in bed with Pamela and laughing. You can see that he feels comfortable. He is at her home. But don't forget that this photo is not just of two people with a family bond, but of a therapist and her patient. Pamela sent Jacob mixed messages on the phone. Here is the text. "You are wonderful, you are brilliant, I have so many thoughts about you, sweet Jake, you are the funniest person, you are so beautiful, I miss you terribly." Jacob loved Calder very much. He treated him like his own son and tried to do good to be a role model for his godson. The plan worked. The 21-year-old Jacob Nolan, who had suffered from a mental disorder for years, seemed to awaken to life again. He was stable, often joked, and had a smile on his face. But unfortunately, the happiness did not last long. Some time after the cousin moved in, Pamela began to complain to him more and more often about her ex-husband, Michael Weiss, Calder's father. Pamela ended her relationship with this man shortly after the birth of their son. Michael Weiss, 38, also worked as a therapist. Outwardly, Michael and Pamela seemed to be a good, calm, loving couple. They attended parties together and enjoyed relaxing at large celebrations. In this photo, Michael and Pamela are celebrating Jacob Nolan's birthday together, for whom his parents organized a big party at one of the expensive bars in Miami. However, not everything in Michael and Pamela's life together was as rosy as in this photo. It is known that both went to the police because of domestic violence. Once, Pamela attacked Michael with a piece of broken glass in her hand. The man then sought a doctor, had the wound stitched, and filed a police report the same day. Pamela was arrested and charged with assault. However, Michael soon forgave the woman and withdrew his complaint. The couple reconciled, but a few months later, Pamela herself went to the police and reported that Michael had threatened her and wanted to kill her. A few weeks later, Pamela withdrew her statement. Michael and Pamela were never officially married. Their relationship lasted about 4 years. After the woman gave birth to a son in 2008, she finally separated from Michael. The two therapists could no longer get along under one roof. Their stormy relationship ended. But a new battle began, the fight for custody of their shared son, Calder. Every day, Pamela spoke disparagingly to Jacob about her former partner. She complained that Michael did not want to pay child support and then even claimed that when the son spent time with his own father, he would do terrible things to him that he couldn't bring himself to talk about. On the morning of November 12, 2012, Jacob Nolan woke up to Pamela's gentle touches. The woman climbed into bed with him, stroked the young man's back, and whispered words of love into his ear. Jacob lay in bed, continuing to receive compliments. "You are my savior, you are the most amazing man in the world, because no one but you understands me," Pamela repeatedly whispered to her cousin. But soon the woman's loving mood vanished. Pamela took a black sports bag from the closet and placed a long-handled hammer and a kitchen knife inside. She began to cry hysterically and told Jacob that today was the day he had to deal with Michael Weiss. Pamela handed him a piece of paper on which several entrances to the multi-story office building where Michael Weiss, the psychotherapist, treated patients were drawn. Jacob got up, grabbed the bag, put the sketch in his pocket, and went to the building. Before he left, Pamela said, "Today is the day our lives will change and get better because Michael will be eliminated." And Jacob made his way to the high-rise building in the middle of Manhattan. He walked around the building, observing it from different angles. The young man entered through the service entrance. A surveillance photo captured him doing so. Jacob checked in on the ground floor, gave his real name, and said he was on his way to the tutoring center. He was allowed through. Jacob took the elevator to the 12th floor and headed for Weiss's office. He heard through the door that a patient appointment was taking place inside. Jacob remained in the corridor, waiting for the appointment to end and for Michael Weiss to be alone. During the long wait, Jacob was nervous, and thoughts rushed through his mind that everything he was doing was wrong. At one point, he wanted to leave and run home, but the thought of returning to Pamela without having fulfilled her request, and thus upsetting her, was stronger. Jacob realized he had no other choice. After the patient left, Jacob entered the office and told Michael that Pamela had asked him to pick up financial documents for Calder's daycare. While Michael was looking for the paperwork, Jacob asked to use the restroom. He went into the bathroom with his black bag, took out a knife, and put it in his pocket. Then he took out the huge hammer, came out of the bathroom, went directly to Michael, and swung it. Fortunately, the doctor reacted in time. He ducked, and the hammer only hit him on the shoulder. Then Jacob pulled the knife from his pocket, and the fight began. Michael was physically larger than Jacob. He quickly defended himself against the man and fought back. At some point, the men moved out into the hallway. Jacob screamed like a madman and called for help. His screams were immediately heard by others who thought the doctor was being attacked by his mentally ill patient. They called emergency services and reported the incident. Before the police and paramedics arrived, the exhausted Jacob and Michael sat in the hallway. Jacob took his cell phone out of his pocket and took this selfie. He then sent it to Pamela asking what he should do next, but he received no answer. Things looked very strange. Jacob did not try to flee. Soon after, the police and ambulance arrived. The injured men were taken to the hospital for medical treatment. Fortunately, neither of them sustained life-threatening injuries. Michael Weiss was treated and discharged home the same day. Jacob's injuries turned out to be more severe. To make matters worse, doctors determined that the man was in a manic state upon admission and had to administer strong medication to him. Jacob Nolan was arrested directly in the hospital while he was being treated. There, he also wrote a long message to Pamela, informing her of what had happened to him and Michael. The woman ignored his message for a long time but later still asked which hospital he was in. Pamela arrived, but she was not allowed to see him as he was already handcuffed to the bed at that time. He spent 4 days in the hospital, after which he was discharged and taken to a prison cell. He was released from pretrial detention on a $50,000 bail. Jacob was allowed to fly from New York to his parents in Florida. A few weeks after the terrible incident, Michael Weiss filed a lawsuit against his former partner, Pamela Buchbinder, accusing her of conspiracy. Michael Weiss claimed it was dangerous to be with Buchbinder and that his son should live with him. He presented video footage from a hardware store showing Pamela and Jacob jointly buying a hammer the day before the attack. The purchase was paid for in cash by the woman. Pamela denied any involvement in the case. She stated that she had asked Jacob to take Michael's financial documents, but not that she had asked her cousin to attack her ex. She did not deny giving him a knife, but she did so that he could protect her son, as the building where Michael Weiss worked had a daycare on the ground floor, which Calder attended. The only thing the woman could never explain was why she bought the hammer the day before the attack. Soon, a family court judge ordered that Michael receive full custody of his biological son, Calder, and prohibited Pamela Buchbinder from any contact with her son for 5 years. Only several months after the act did Jacob Nolan openly accuse his cousin Pamela that the attack on Michael Weiss had been solely her idea. Jacob admitted that Buchbinder had carefully planned the crime. She wanted him to go to Weiss's office and hit him on the head, playing the Beatles song Maxwell's Silver Hammer beforehand. Jacob claimed he didn't know what he was doing. Pamela had completely taken over his mind. He didn't even think of inventing a false name when he entered the office center, so distraught was he. The woman told the man every day that Michael was hurting her son. It turned out there was not a single piece of evidence for her words. No one had ever heard Michael yelling at Calder or saying anything bad to him. On the contrary, those close to him said that the man loved his son very much. Despite the strange photos in bed that might suggest Jacob and Pamela were close, the man denied an intimate relationship with his cousin, and as for the love messages, they were simply friendly communication. Jacob revealed that he considered Pamela family, felt close to her and trusted her completely. Jacob's parents were distraught. They fully supported their son and claimed Pamela had brainwashed him using psychological techniques from her practice. The trial dragged on. 4 years after the act, in 2016, journalists met Jacob Nolan before another hearing, and he agreed to a short interview. The young man looked good, and he answered questions clearly and reasonably. Jacob said that he had been taking medication for over 1.5 years and was finally feeling an improvement in his psycho-emotional state. The 4 years leading up to the trial flew by. He spent most of his time in hospitals and psychiatric facilities. In addition to his mental problems, he tried to recover from his addiction. He said that in May 2015, his life was again at stake. Then he fell into a coma due to severe poisoning from illegal substances. Doctors gave Jacob no chance of survival, but a miracle happened. He regained consciousness and soon recovered. In March 2016, Jacob Nolan's trial began. He claimed Pamela Buchbinder had forced him to attack Michael Weiss. At the time of the act, the man believed this was the only chance to save his godson, Calder. The prosecution described Jacob as a spoiled child of wealthy parents. They said Jacob had told a total of 3 different versions of events and had been confused repeatedly. When the police first arrived at Michael Weiss's practice, Jake pointed at the therapist and said, "He is the one who attacked me with a knife." When questioned, he claimed he had never swung the hammer in Michael's office. He said he had brought the hammer for self-defense because he was afraid of Weiss. According to Jacob's third version, Michael Weiss was the first to pull the hammer from his bag and attack him. But how could Michael Weiss have known that Jacob had the tool in his bag? The prosecution provided another important piece of information in the case, which they considered the main motive for the attack on Michael Weiss. It turned out that Michael had taken out a life insurance policy worth $1.5 million shortly before the tragedy. The beneficiary was his son, Calder. However, just 3 days before the attack, on November 9, 2012, Michael Weiss agreed to put Pamela Buchbinder's name on the policy and allow her to manage his son's money. Jacob said that he had heard about the insurance policy for the first time then, and that Pamela had never told him anything about her personal financial affairs. In the trial, it became known that Pamela and Jacob had also bought plastic cable ties in a hardware store in addition to the hammer. The defendant confirmed this and made another open confession. Jacob revealed that Pamela had asked him to do more than just kill Michael Weiss. She wanted the man to suffer before he died and described the brutal acts Jacob was supposed to inflict on Michael. Before the public, the man told the woman that he would not do it, as he was not capable of such extreme cruelty, but he agreed just to kill. He also said that Pamela wanted to make a homemade weapon from an air pistol, but when they arrived at the hardware store, they decided it would be easier and better to use a hammer. Jacob Nolan's lawyers did not deny that he committed the act. They wanted the man to be declared legally insane. However, as practice shows, this is very difficult to prove. Unfortunately, there are no blood tests, X-rays, or other tests that can look into a person's mind and accurately say what they thought and felt at the time of the act. Conclusions are drawn from conversations during the initial questioning, police reports in medical records, and nowadays sometimes from social media posts. It is also not uncommon for 2 different psychiatrists to provide 2 different expert opinions. All of this often confuses judges and juries. Mental illnesses often affect feelings, thoughts, and behavior, but at the trial, Jacob Nolan understood exactly what he had done and admitted that his act was wrong and terrible. Jacob did not look like a madman. At the trial, he was very good-looking, eloquent, well-dressed, and answered questions clearly and precisely. Pamela Buchbinder herself, by the way, was not present at the trial. Neither the prosecution nor the defense had called the woman as a witness. And since Jacob suffered from a mental disorder, the defense lawyers hardly believed his words that Pamela was the initiator of the attack. It is known that Jacob Nolan's lawyers had hired private investigators to shadow Pamela Buchbinder even before the trial, but no one could find her. The woman's apartment was empty. In March 2016, the 24-year-old Jacob Nolan was found guilty of attempted murder and second-degree assault after a 2-week trial. The man was sentenced to 9.5 years in prison. Had he been found legally insane at the time of the act, he would have faced a longer period in a treatment facility. Jacob was very upset when he learned how much time he had to spend behind bars. "That's not fair. I'm not a danger to society," he said. Jacob's parents believed that the decision to send their son to his cousin was the biggest mistake of their lives. Another year passed. On October 19, 2017, almost 5 years after the attack on Michael Weiss, police officers tracked down Pamela Buchbinder in Syracuse, New York. The Manhattan district attorney had accused Pamela of instructing Jacob Nolan to kill her former partner Michael Weiss. At the time of her arrest, the woman's handbag contained her passport, Calder's birth certificate, and his expired passport. Pamela was arrested and taken into custody. The woman continued to deny her guilt. She hired two of New York's best and most expensive lawyers, who immediately claimed that the video footage of Pamela buying the hammer was fake. The lawyers demanded that Buchbinder be released on a $1.5 million bail. They did not stop arguing that Pamela was an educated person, a psychotherapist, and it would never have occurred to her to organize a murder. For all 5 years after Jacob's attack on Michael, Pamela lived a normal life. She worked, rented an apartment. The woman did not hide or flee to another country. The only thing she did was avoid journalists and not comment on Nolan's crime. Pamela's lawyers presented new, in their opinion, important evidence in court, a note allegedly written by Jacob Nolan, which he gave to his mother immediately after the attack on Michael Weiss in 2022 at the hospital. In the note, Jacob wrote, "Pamela had nothing to do with it." Buchbinder's lawyers considered this a crucial piece of evidence that could have allowed the woman's release on bail, but the judge rejected the motion, believing that Jacob Nolan was in a manic state during his hospital stay and therefore his note should not be believed. Pamela Buchbinder was imprisoned at the notorious Rikers Island jail in New York before her trial. She remained there for a full 5 years due to legal disputes and a pandemic. Only on September 7, 2022 did Pamela make a statement at a pretrial hearing. The woman agreed to plead guilty in exchange for a reduced sentence. However, a month later, she changed her mind and retracted her confession. Pamela reported that on the day she agreed to the plea deal, she had already been physically assaulted by prison guards in the morning. Furthermore, she had not taken her medication that day and began to feel ill. The woman was then put on a bus and taken to the courthouse. Next to her, another inmate was smoking illegal substances. Pamela claimed she felt the effects of these substances on herself while sitting next to the two. Her consciousness changed, and during a further interrogation, she confessed to the crime. The judge did not accept this acquittal by Pamela Buchbinder and ordered the maintenance of the agreement and the continuation of the criminal proceedings. According to the prosecutor, Pamela's love for Michael turned into hate. She tried to control the man, monitored his life, and wanted to receive $1.5 million from the insurance company. Pamela Buchbinder's own address during the trial was short. "I am very sorry that we are all gathered here today." What the prosecutor said may have been true. Pamela Buchbinder was found guilty and sentenced to 11 years in prison. After the verdict was announced, the woman turned with a sad gaze to her relatives, who sent her air kisses. To this day, it is known that Jacob Nolan and Pamela Buchbinder are still serving their sentences in different correctional facilities in New York. Jacob will be released in 2024 and Pamela in 2027. Jacob communicates regularly with his parents by phone. The young man admitted that he thinks about his terrible deed every night. He is completely remorseful and has even expressed a desire to meet Michael Weiss personally, hug him, and ask for forgiveness. Jacob is sure that Pamela Buchbinder used him for her own dirty purposes. She did not care what happened to her cousin next. When Pamela is released, her son Calder will be 19 years old. He is now being raised by his own father, Michael Weiss, who still works as a psychotherapist and treats patients in central Manhattan. The man makes no secret of the fact that he still suffers from post-traumatic stress disorder after the attack. He constantly looks around on the street and is afraid that the unpleasant story will repeat itself. Michael has no doubt that Pamela Buchbinder still hates him and will not stop pursuing him even after her release. If you liked the video, please give it a like. That helps a lot with its distribution. Also, leave a comment to support the channel and recommend the video further. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new videos. Thanks for watching and take care.